Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Environmental Justice Now. My name is Leah Jones, and I am the Water Justice Organizer and Organizing Coordinator here at Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. Before we get started today, I like to do a brief land acknowledgement as usual. While we are on a video call and many of us are joining in from different places, we want to remind ourselves that we do gather on the unceded land of the indigenous peoples. I'm joining in from so-called Richmond, Virginia, and I'm currently located on the land of the Powhatan and Chickahominy peoples. So if you are unsure whose land you are on and you would like to learn more and find out, you can always visit native-land.ca to find out. So today on this week's episode, we want to talk about something that happened last week, actually. So last week, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, also known as the IPCC, released a new report covering the latest climate science, the threats from climate change, and what we can do to limit the climate crisis. The report emphasized that at least 3.3 billion people's daily lives are highly vulnerable to climate change and are 15 times more likely to die from extreme weather than in years past. So huge findings. This report has clarified that we must take more robust global climate measures to avoid climate disasters. And this is no time to increase fossil fuel production, cut gas taxes, or build new gas and oil infrastructure. It really is time to increase the production of renewable alternatives and to ensure communities suffering from the climate crisis are the leading voices on climate change. So starting with just a little bit about the report, it is the summary, this year's report, it is the summary of all reports of the IPCC's sixth assessment cycle that were published actually between 2018 and 2023, which included the landmark of the global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius, as well as the more recent reports emphasizing how human-caused greenhouse gases are causing, unprecedented damage. And the report demonstrating that at current levels, with the way things are, our systems operate today, many parts of the planet will become unlivable in the next few decades. So even just the things that we've seen with flooding in California to Sudan, from droughts in Kenya to here in the U.S. as well, it's becoming clearer and clearer every day that we are running out of time and the need to act is only becoming more pressing. So with that being said, we just wanted to share some of the highlights that we took away from the IPCC report this year. And a lot of this input came from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is a really awesome resource that we'll be sure to share at the end as well. What we found to be one of the major highlights coming out of this report is that first and foremost, the viability of humanity living on this planet totally rests on the actions that we take within literally the next 7 years. So there is literally no time to waste and ensure that we don't reach that 1.5 degrees Celsius ceiling, because otherwise we likely will be exceeding that limit in the next few decades, in the next few years, really. Another really big highlight that we wanted to take away that we wanted to share with you all to be sure that you took away was that greenhouse gas emissions will lead to increasing global warming in the near term. And it's likely that this will reach a 1.5 degrees Celsius between the year 2030 and 2035. So that's like basically within the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years. So we are currently at around 1.1 degrees Celsius of warming. However, current climate policies are projected to actually increase global warming by 3.2 degrees by the year 2100. Which in the grand scheme of things really isn't that far. That could be about a lifetime away, right? So these are things, it's not in the near future or the far future, it's very near, right? our window is beginning to close, unfortunately. A few other highlights that we wanted to share today is that human-caused climate change is already affecting, as we've seen, many weather and climate extremes in every region across the globe, with widespread damage to both nature, our earth, and the people who live on these lands. With honestly most of the damage being done to communities and nations, countries that are already in vulnerable positions, particularly economically, right? Which ultimately increases poverty in these regions and in these communities, leaving them even further behind in this threat of the climate crisis. So, another point to be taken away from this report is that to keep within the 1.5 degree limit, emissions really need to be reduced by at least 43% by the year 2030. 2023 now, 7 years, as we mentioned, and at least by 60% by the year 2035. So we need to see substantial decreases in our emissions in the next decade, which means some big changes are going to happen, right? This is decisive. This is the decade to make this happen. This is our window. So, in addition to that, the report also pointed out a couple of interesting factors I thought regarding the fossil fuel industry and how funds are being allocated towards this industry still. So, it was revealed that public and private finance flows for fossil fuels are still greater, actually, than those for climate adaptation and mitigation. How is it possible that, as we already know so much year after year with this IPCC report being put out, we're still putting more of our finances towards fossil fuels than renewables, when it's been made clear that we need to start making that transition? So it's important that we're not dragging our feet on making that transition, and making our money match what our mouths are saying, right? So in addition to that, among other measures to ensure energy systems are net zero carbon emitters, we need, they mention a substantial reduction in overall fossil fuel use, minimal use of unabated fossil fuels, and use of carbon capture and storage in the remaining fossil fuel systems, energy conservation and energy efficiency, and greater integration across the energy system. So, of course, once again, totally moving away from those fossil fuels and into this new technology of renewables. And in this process, I also love that the report points out that prioritizing equity, social justice, inclusion, and just transition processes will enable us to continue to make progress in this ambitious climate mitigation action, and hopefully to create more climate resiliency as we hope to continue to develop as we make these transitions. So all of this data that has been presented within this report has honestly already backed up so much of what we already knew, which is that for the health of our ecosystems and our communities, energy, food, transport, and manufacturing systems all have to be changed in a way that prioritizes those really most impacted by climate change and aims to build resilience and community health, especially in those areas and communities that are most impacted. However, though I know much of this has been very drab, very bleak, the good news in all of this is that that came out of this report is, of course, we still do have time. Like, even though it is very close, knocking on our doors, we don't have to open it quite, or it's not being opened for us quite yet. And so things are not too late. We can still take action. And on top of that, the solutions are out there. We do have an opportunity to reach our goals and reach our targets, make sure we don't reach that 1.5 degrees Celsius ceiling. If we implement the technology that's already available, we can actually reduce our emissions by at least 43% over the next 7 years. That goal is achievable. And the IPCC highlights also that to achieve this transition from fossil fuels without carbon capture and storage to very low or zero carbon energy sources such as renewables or fossil fuels with CSS, it demands measures and improving, it demands side measures and improving efficiency. So, which goes hands in hand, once again, with new technology moving forward into that. So, the actual UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres actually outlined and shared a major new acceleration agenda to launch this report, which included ensuring net zero electricity generation by 2035 for all developed economies and 2040 for the rest of the world. It also included seizing all licensing or funding of any new oil and gas consistent with the findings of the International Energy Agency. It also is stopping any expansion of existing oil and gas reserves, shifting subsidies from fossil fuels to a just energy transition. And it also is establishing a global phase down of existing oil and gas production compatible with the 2050 global net zero target. So really totally moving away and making sure we're staying on target with the goals that have been set on a global scale. And lastly, Guterres mentions on the agenda speeding up efforts to deliver climate justice to those on the front lines, which I think is definitely imperative in all of this, making sure that we aren't dragging our feet because the communities that have already begun to feel the impacts of climate change can't wait anymore. We can't leave these communities behind, our neighbors, right? So over the years, there has been quite a bit of pushback on accepting renewables that's been holding us back from making this transition. And a big part of that is affordability and what the capability of renewables are. However, with this report, it has actually been found that officially solar and wind are now actually the cheapest source of new power in countries, representing 90% of electricity generation. And in addition to that, electric vehicles are projected to be at price parity with internal combustion engines in the next 2 to 3 years. So we are making some progress, which is also another silver lining in all of this. However, reflecting in just, I guess, in totality on the report, an important piece I think that stood out, spoke to the one thing that might hold us back from making progress in all of this. It's really our attitude and our perspective in this effort especially towards change. The IPCC wrote that it shows we're not too late to avoid passing the 1.5 degrees Celsius, but the greatest threat is apathy. The impacts of climate change will only get worse. This transformation can be achieved through clear, courageous, and concerted policies to further unlock the transformative power of financial markets, industry, and innovators. So it's really imperative that our policymakers and our leaders do not ignore the impacts that we've already begun to see of climate change and really begin to make genuine efforts to follow through on climate goals. And a big part of that really is changing the traditional extractive practices and systems that we do have in place that harm the earth and our communities. So it is crucial for us to work towards, more just, equitable solutions and recreate our systems and policies in a way that prioritize climate and protects all futures, not just a particular some who can afford it, right? This means that we have to see those really big changes very soon. The IPCC report has told us 7 years thus far, and hopefully we can make it happen even sooner than that. But I know that could be a difficult image. That might be difficult to imagine, but I believe, in all honesty, it'll be even harder to imagine no longer being able to enjoy creation and our common home because of the damage that we've caused. So by reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, we can preserve creation and our communities, our neighbors that have been built for generations. So I will leave that with that image with everyone as a call to take action and keep making efforts in your communities to advance climate and environmental justice and throughout the state of Virginia so that we can also do our part in reducing our carbon emissions. So we do actually have a few opportunities as well for you to get involved with the IPL this upcoming Earth Month. We're right on the edge of Earth Month now. And we actually have a webpage available with all of the resources and events that we have upcoming. You can check out that link there on the screen and in the comments where you can find our list of resources and ongoing events. We will also be having a special Earth Day celebration this year on the day of Earth Day, an East African coffee ceremony where we'll be enjoying good conversation, snacks, and celebrating Earth Day. So please be sure to check out our resources, our upcoming events, and celebrate Earth Day with us. And in the meantime, as usual, you can always sign up to be a supporter if you aren't already, to stay in the know with everything VIPL. And we'll be back again next week as usual, same time, same place. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great weekend.